The new boss fights in We Who Are About to Die are a great way to get your hands on some of the best weapons in the game, including some unique ones that you won't find anywhere else. These fights can also be tough though, so let's go through every boss and talk about the best ways to beat them and the weapons you get from them. Before talking about the bosses themselves though, there are a few general tips you can apply to all the boss fights. First of all, boss fights only appear at weeks 4, 9, and 16. Bosses all have 150 HP, and their minions, if they have any, only have 50. I like to take the minions out quickly since they're weaker so that I can just focus on the boss. Bosses are also significantly taller than normal units, and it makes hitting their heads really easy. Even if they have a shield, they don't really block their heads properly. Boss fights are always spoils to the victor, so their best use is getting a better weapon. The cash reward isn't actually that great. And obviously that makes the early ones a bit better, whereas later you might already have a better weapon than the boss is using. Their weapons are usually pretty damaged after the fight, so you'll probably want to repair them first before you start using them. And one last thing, if you re-roll the fights, the boss fight will always stay the same. So now let's talk about the specific bosses and their weapons. Starting with the week 4 bosses, let's take a look at Morthos the Bull. This fight starts with 2 berserkers, then 2 more, and then the boss. The berserkers can be a little annoying. They have shields and decent helmets, so they'll tank a few hits. Their shields break pretty easily, so punching through them isn't a bad move. Also watch out for their tenderizers because they can do some damage. Morthos himself uses a poleaxe, so if you can poke him from range, that'll make him really easy. His armor's not very good either, so hit him wherever you can and it'll do the job pretty well. Once you do kill him, his axe is actually one of the best new weapons in the game. It looks like an iron double chakra at first, but it's actually longer, and more importantly, it can stab. This makes it way more versatile than most polearms because you can use the stab to get around shields on the left side. It's also great for hitting enemies coming straight at you, obviously. So I love killing this guy because it's not the hardest fight and his weapon is honestly good enough to last you the rest of the run. Next, let's talk about the Pagan Prophet. So this fight's going to have 4 cultists coming out 2 at a time, followed by the Prophet and 2 more cultists. None of them use shields, and they barely wear armor, so poking from a distance is really good again here, but pretty much any weapon will work on these guys. Try to get rid of the cultist quickly so you can focus on the Prophet, because you don't want to get hit by him. He can do a lot of damage. If you do have to get close, just watch him and try to only attack when he's in between attacks. There's no rush to kill him, so don't get risky with it. Once you kill him, his weapon is pretty good. It does 32 damage plus bonus damage to unarmored. It is a little limited in its swings as a polearm, but its shape is really good for hooking around shields, and it can do you nicely for quite a few weeks. This fight is pretty easy, so I'd recommend taking it if the scythe would be an upgrade for you. Alright, so now let's take a look at the Taskmaster. This fight will have 3 thralls all at once and then the boss. The thralls are easy, lightly armored, little bucklers, just swing at their heads and they'll go down quickly. The boss is a little trickier. He's got decently armored arms and a shield, so swinging at his sides isn't great. If you can land hits on his body, that's good, and attacking his head is good too since his helmet has really low durability. His claw does a ton of damage, but it has short range, so a long weapon helps yet again. If you do have to get close, a big shield helps a lot because his weapon is hard to predict. Once you kill him, his claw is really good. It has 35 damage and you can get consistent fast hits with it. It's literally an iron claw with real durability, so if you've used the iron claw before, you know how good that is. This fight's maybe a little harder than the last 2, but I think it's worth it for this weapon. And finally for the week 4 fights, we have the Owakhan twins. So this is a different fight from the first 3. This one has you fighting 2 elites at the same time, which frankly is just a lot harder. 2 guys with damaging weapons and lots of stamina chasing you around can be kinda overwhelming. I think the best way to beat them is to focus on the one with the sword first. He's a little more unpredictable and dangerous. It's easier to keep track of the other guy's spear, whereas this guy kinda waves the sword around like an idiot. Like the other 2-handed bosses, poking him from a distance works well. Their armor isn't very good, so anywhere works, especially the head. Once you get him down, pick up his sword if it does more damage than your weapon. It does 26 damage and has bonus against armor. It's good for stabbing over the other guy's shield and hitting his head, or swinging in from the sides. Take your time with this guy and just watch his spear. Dodging to the right is a really good way to avoid spears. Now once you kill them, obviously you got a choice. The sword has slightly better stats and the bonus against armor, but obviously the spear can be used with a shield. Weeks 5 to about 9 are also a really good time for spears since you can face lots of 2-handing enemies. You could also skip this fight entirely because they probably are the weakest weapons in the hardest fight out of the 4. I wouldn't really recommend this one unless you really want a spear. So that's it for the week 4 bosses, but I've got just a couple last little tips for them. I talked about how keeping your distance and stabbing is pretty effective in each fight, so having a spear or at least a long sword ready for week 4 can really help. Also, you always fight in this arena, and you need to be careful with these little pools. They slow your movement, and they stop you from dodging, which can really get you in trouble. Alright, let's move on to the week 9 fights. This time there's only 2. Let's start with Khunda the Pillager. So this fight has 7 minions. It's a lot, but they don't wear much armor, and most of them don't use shields either, so they go down quickly. As for Khunda, he's dangerous. The sword he uses is really good, and he's really aggressive with it, often attacking twice in quick succession. His shield is really easy to swing past on both sides, and like other bosses, he doesn't defend his head very well, so you can get your damage in, but try to take your time and play around his attacks. A spear will work fine for this fight too, but I actually prefer a weapon that I can swing around his shield and do a bit more damage with, like an axe or even a sword since his shield is so narrow. Once you kill him, he drops a regular curved Lefosi Daka. It's not actually a unique, it's the same one that you can buy in the store, but it's still a really good weapon. One of my new favorite weapons in fact, and I'd say it's about as good or even better than Triumph. So this is a bit of a tough fight, but you're getting a really good weapon. The only thing is that since you can buy it, if you got the coin and the fame to roll the store, that might be the easier option. But if you don't have the resources, then try this fight. The other boss in this week is actually another double boss fight, the Senator and his guards. You got the 2 big shielded guards and the little 50 HP Senator who really isn't much of a concern. Just kill him quickly so you can focus on the big boys. Now these guys can be kind of tough. Again, it's hard to have 2 elites on you. The one with the spear is more dangerous, so I like to focus on him first. The other one has that tiny linoleum hatchet, so as long as you don't really get close to him, he can't do much to you. Their shields are wide, so you'll need a decent weapon or good flanking to get around them. Otherwise, just target the head as usual. Disarming one of their shields and taking it is also a great thing you can try to do. Once you kill the spear guy, you might want to pick up his spear too and use it to kill the other guy, because otherwise he might pick it up, which makes him a lot more dangerous. With this guy, you really just have to keep a little bit of distance, and as long as he has that hatchet, he's not dangerous. Now the funny thing about this fight and the loot is that nothing here is actually unique except for the Senator's buckler. You probably don't want that though, and even though it isn't unique, the guard's spear is about as good as a Faradaka, so that's easily the best option here. Grab one of their shields if you want to, and you'll have a nice spear setup for the late game. And now let's talk about the late game bosses. So week 16 is pretty late. You should probably have a really good weapon by now anyway, and you might prefer to just skip this fight and do one for more money. But if you are choosing these fights, there are a couple of things to talk about. Let's start with the Legate. He has 5 sword guards, 3 at first, and then a couple more alongside him. They use a smaller version of the tower shield, and you can swing over it horizontally pretty well with a sword or any two-handed weapon. You can poke around it with a spear too. It'll be a bit slower, but this is a pretty safe strategy, especially since the Legate is two-handing, so using a spear for him makes it really easy. He has a lot of armor, and it's all good, but like any armor, it will break eventually. Just focus your attacks on one spot, and make sure your weapon's condition is good before this fight, because there is a lot to get through. Once you kill everyone, the loot is a little disappointing. It's just a regular Haney and Clava, which is a good weapon for sure, but it's not too special for this point in the game. If you can use a cheaper setup to kill him though, it can make for some nice profit, or just a good weapon to have on hand. And finally, we've got Baegar The Aspired. This is just a simple 1v1, no minions to worry about, but this is a tricky one because unlike the other bosses, he can have different weapons. He might use a shield and a one-hander or a spear, or he might use a two-hander, and no matter what, they'll be godly items. So the safest thing you can do is bring a spear and a good shield, since spears are a pretty good matchup against anything, and especially if he's two-handing. Be extra careful if he is two-handing and keep your distance because he can easily hit for 50 plus. He also wears full exalted armor, so he can eat some hits, but just be patient and try to focus one spot, ideally his head. And at the end of the day, it's a 1v1 and there's no rush, just be patient, watch his weapon, and attack when it's safe. When it comes to the loot, obviously godly weapons are all great. If you're lucky, he'll have one of the really expensive ones like Imperius or Thundaka. If he has one of the cheaper ones and you already have a weapon you like, then maybe you just pick up his shield, but chances are you get something pretty good out of this fight. And that's that for the bosses. I think they're a really fun addition to the game and a great way to obtain some of the best weapons. The devs were saying that everything's still subject to change, so you might see a boss change tiers or something, and they might even all get unique weapons at some point, which would be really cool. I think you're generally going to get the most out of the early ones, so make sure you're ready for week 4 and then you can really get your run moving in the right direction. Let me know what other topics you'd like to see a video on for this update, and as always, thanks for watching and I'll see you later.